So, the finale. We are done with season 1 of Wheel of Time, and now the wait begins. This is going to be brutal, man. How long until season 2? Anyone know? I'm going to need a Wheel of Time fix pretty soon, I can tell you that. Anyway, this video is going to be spoiler-free, by which I mean no book spoilers. I'm obviously going to be spoiling the show. So if you haven't read any of the books, this video is completely safe for you. I will not spoil anything in the book, so let's go.
Let's be nerdy, babe. Let's be nerdy, let's be nerdy. Let's be nerdy, babe. Let's be nerdy, babe. Let's be nerdy, let's be nerdy, babe.
So I'm in a bit of an interesting position right now. I've now watched the episode 4 times, which is much more, like it's double what I've normally watched by the time I do my review. But I watched it when it dropped, and then I did the official rewatch on Twitter because, like, 3 of my friends were hosting it, so I wasn't going to miss that. And then my closest friend here in Korea, I was having dinner with her and her family, Christmas Eve, which was yesterday. It's Christmas today. Merry Christmas. But she had, we'd watched the first 3 episodes together, and then she watched the rest of it. And then she wanted to watch the finale with me, and I wasn't going to, pass that up. So I watched it with her, and then I watched it again while taking notes for this breakdown. So I feel like I've seen it double the amount of times I normally have, and I feel pretty confident in my opinions on this one. And there are some things I absolutely loved from this episode, but as a whole, this one is my least favorite of the season. Some of the reasons for that are book related, and I will talk more about those, of course, in my full spoilers video. But even without considering the books, I feel like there were things in this episode that felt forced and jarring. And, excessive time was spent on things that I do not think were necessary and took away from moments that could have used a bit more time. For example, one of my favorite moments, a moment that literally, it brought me to tears the first time I watched it because I was just so happy to see these lines that were lifted straight from the books and were being acted out by these amazing actors. Those lines, they needed something more before them in order to fully make sense. And not even that much more, but maybe 3 more lines or something. I don't know. Time could have been taken from these other scenes that felt entirely auxiliary. I don't know. They felt extraneous to me to give these 2 main characters a couple more lines to make their scene make more sense. The big battle, despite how devastating it actually was, when I think about it, it somehow felt underwhelming. And I'm not entirely sure why. I can't quite put my finger on it. It might be because the devastation was mostly involving people that I just don't care about, and that actually might be why so much time was spent trying to get us to care about these characters that were going to die, so that we would feel the devastation. But for me, it didn't work. That may be the book reader in me, knowing who is important and who isn't, but I don't think so. It just didn't work for me. I was actually bored at times during the battle, and when watching it with my friend who had not read the books, had never seen it before, I could tell she wasn't that engaged in that part of it either. Oh, and fake out deaths. I find it really frustrating that we got a fake out death with a character who has already had a fake out death this season. I think I know what they were trying to do at that moment, and I have thoughts that will come in the full spoiler video, but it was just like, we already did this. We already did this with her. We don't need to do it again. Things that I liked, though. I liked how the battle, if you want to call it that, whatever you want to call it, that was at the eye. I liked how that played out. Without going into detail, it is quite different from the books, but I think it had to be, and I think this worked well. I loved seeing the Age of Legends at the beginning. That was super exciting for me. And that scene with Lan and Nynaeve, that's the scene I was talking about, by the way. The one that just needed a bit more time, just maybe 3 more lines. Whatever, I still love it. It still brought me to tears, and it was acted really well, and if I'm honest, I have that scene memorized from the book, so I can, just sort of fill in the missing parts in my head to make it work. And, yeah, if you wonder what I mean about that, I'll talk about that in the spoilers video. And the fleet at the end, that is an amazing hook, and as a book reader, when I saw, with those characters, has me so terrified for the next season. And finally, Fain. Oh, I love what they've done with Fain. He's so ominous, and the actor was able to deliver that exposition so well. He gives a speech that is it's pure exposition, but he chews it up, and it's terrifying, and it's fantastic, and I love it. Which, I guess, that leads into, once again, he's not the only one. The acting. Rosamund Pike, of course, knocking it out of the park, as always. Just, that woman, she's so good at her job. And, Yasha Stradowski, in this episode, obviously, like, this was his episode to shine, but he did it. Like, he really was amazing in this episode. Perfect Rand. Okay, my rating. As I said, this one for me is at the bottom. I'm giving it a 5.5 out of 10. It's still more interesting to me than anything else that's out there right now, but my personal level of enjoyment for this episode was just, it was neutral. Like, I don't hate it, but I'm not hyped about it. It's, I was about to say it's mashed potatoes, but I actually really like mashed potatoes. It's lightly buttered toast. You know, I'm not super excited about it, but it's nice. It's fine. It'll do. Okay, now that I've done that, let's get into the breakdown. The cold open is a scene from 3,000 years ago, and we see a man who we learn his name is Luz Theron Telamon, and a woman named Latra, and they're sitting in a relatively modern-looking room. They're disagreeing about something. Luz has a plan he thinks that will cage the Dark One forever, but none of the female Aes Sedai agree with him, and as Latra says, they worry that if this plan fails, he will expose, like, the source, the one power, to the Dark One, who will corrupt it. But he says he's gonna go and do it, and she says, fine, the woman will stay and pick up the pieces after he inevitably fails, which we know he did. After the credits, we pick up right where we left off last episode. Moiraine and Rand walking through the blight and coming across bodies, or one body anyway, being consumed by the blight. Okay, I'm gonna just stop here for a minute and talk about the visuals of the blight. Because as I said, I've now watched this episode 4 times, so I'm not normally able to do this in this video, but I was trying to figure out in my first couple of viewings what it was about the blight that was bothering me. It's claustrophobic. It definitely looks like it smells bad. It's different from the books, but not in a way that I feel like really matters at all, so that was fine. But something about it wasn't reading right to me. Like, and I think I figured out what it is. It's too still. It's practical effects, right? Which I love, because, they're really in there, but if you're ever in a real forest with real foliage, there's always some movement. And because these aren't real, like, they're likely on a sound stage somewhere, they're just not moving at all. Like, the trees, the leaves, like, there's scenes where they're trying to move, like, they've obviously had, breeze put in, but they're too still. Shots when they're panning around or over it or something where the camera is creating movement, I really like how it looks. I'm like, oh, this looks amazing. And then something will switch in the way they're shooting, and my brain will just go, oh, it's a set. And I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I'm pretty sure it's just too still. Anyway, back in Fal Dara, Egwene is furiously packing, and Perrin comes into her room telling her that they can't go to the Blight because they'll all die. Egwene just says simply, like, she loves Rand, and Perrin says that he does too. Then Egwene asks if, her and Perrin's relationship is okay, and he says yes, and good, I hope that's the last we ever hear about that. In the Blight, Rand and Moiraine decide to have, like, a little rest within view of the Towers of Malkir, which is Lan's home country that has now been swallowed by the Blight. Those ruins, by the way, look like they've been abandoned for centuries, but it's apparently only been about 40 years. In Fal Dara, Nynaeve approaches Lan, who is obviously worrying about Moiraine. He can't feel her through the bond, so he knows that she does not want to be followed. Nynaeve says, though, that she can tell Lan how to track Moiraine because she has a tell. And in thinking about this more, because, this episode just had my mind wandering a bit, so I was thinking about things that just aren't important. But I think it must have something to do with the way she walks, right? Like, something special in her footprints or something. I don't know. It does feel weird, though, that whatever her tell would be, that Lan wouldn't know this, because they've been traveling together for, 20 years. I don't know. I'm gonna give this a pass, though, because my knowledge about tracking is, like, I know nothing. Lan is overwhelmed that Nynaeve is going to let him go, into the Blight without her, and then there's a speech, and it's right out of the books, and the show did it to me. I burst into tears, like, the first time I watched this, because I was so happy to get this scene. But there's a little bit of context missing here, and I feel, I have to say this for the spoiler video, but just a couple more lines could have made this perfect, and I don't know, I'm still happy, I still love it, I'm still so glad that I got to see it, but I wish it had been given just a little bit more room on either side of it would have worked. Okay, Beautiful poetry. Then he asks her how to find Moraine. In the blight, Rand wakes from a nap, and Moraine asks him what he dreamed, and he says he dreamed about the Dark One, and then a sword bursts through Moraine's mouth, and Fire Eyes appears behind her, so this is actually a dream. Fire Eyes turns himself into the image of a man, and then looks at Rand and says he looks nothing like the previous dragon, but he can see that it's him. Fire Eyes, the Dark One, starts taunting Rand, saying that the last time he confronted him, he came with 99 other men, all much stronger than Moraine, so this attempt to fight him is pretty pathetic. Rand pulls his sword, and the Dark One notes that it's a heron-marked blade, and Rand says that he got it from his father. The Dark One, continues to taunt him with the fact that Tam isn't actually his father, and Rand has had enough of this, and he decides to wake himself up by stabbing himself in the stomach, which is a little overdramatic if you ask me. He starts awake, and the real Moraine asks him what he dreamed, and he says it was the Dark One, and she asks what the Dark One says, and he says he just doesn't believe the Dark One. So he asks Moraine what her plan is at the Eye, and she again asks him what the Dark One said, and this made me laugh. They're both so stubborn, neither of them answering each other's question. Just tell me. Meh. I liked this exchange. It was cool. But Rand wins. Moraine reveals her plan. She gives him something that is called a Sa Angriel, a sculpture that he can focus his channeling into, and it will increase his power 100-fold. He asks her what he's supposed to do with that power, and she says, all I gotta do is put the Dark One back in the prison. In Fal Dara, Nynaeve is trying to listen to the wind, but she doesn't hear anything. She hasn't been able to listen to the wind since the first time she channeled. Egwene listens beside her and hears something that reminds her of what they heard on Beltane, except it is much, much worse. In the Blight, Rand asks if Moraine will teach him how to channel, but she says that she can't, because every time he channels, the madness is going to come closer. But not to worry, when he needs to be able to channel, he will. He asks her how she knows, and she tells a story about how when she was a novice, she had trouble channeling herself, and then an Aes Sedai came and beat her until she just instinctively was able to channel, and she promises Rand that the same thing will happen to him. In Fal Dara, Perrin, Egwene, and Nynaeve go to see Min, but Min says that she's not going to tell them anybody else's secrets. The only thing she does tell them, though, is that everything she does see eventually comes true, and then we see what she's seeing. And she is seeing visions of, Nynaeve burning up, and then she's seeing, the soldiers with battle wounds and dying, so it's not looking good, and then we hear a warning bell or something sound within the fortress. Amelisa, Agomar, and Uno, walk through the hall, discussing the horde of at least 5,000 to 10,000 Trollocs who are approaching, and the fact that the drawbridge was sabotaged, which means that there are dark friends in Fal Dara. Rand and Moraine approach a massive hole in the ground with steps carved into the side of it in a form that someone in the comments on one of my videos let me know is a step well. This, I have to say, is absolutely nothing like what the Eye of the World looks like in the books. I like this for what it was in the show because it definitely looks like a remnant of something massive, and I think that was right for what they were going for here. Anyway, Rand suddenly sort of remembers or realizes something that Moraine has said, that she said whoever goes to the Eye of the World with a dragon will die, and he asks her if that includes her. She doesn't answer, so he tells her, don't come with me, but she just shakes her head, and they descend into the Eye together. We then see a shot of Lan making his way through the Blight, and he's not even looking at the ground at all. And okay, I know I said I wasn't going to talk about tracking anymore, but I have so many questions, and if they hadn't brought it up, if they hadn't mentioned tracking, I wouldn't have these questions, but I'm giving it a pass because I know nothing, but also, if I was more engaged in this episode, maybe my mind wouldn't keep getting sidetracked by this. It's not even important, but I'm getting sidetracked by it. Then we see Amelisa helping her brother, Lord Agomar, put on his armor, and this scene, this is one that I felt like went on for way too long. He's got his armor, he's putting it on, she says the gap will not hold against the Trollocs, he agrees and says that the men will fight at the gap and the women will defend Fal Dara, and yeah, that's it. That's the gist of the scene. And it went on for forever. In the Eye of the World, Rand asks what this place used to be, but Moraine doesn't know, as every record of its existence was purged from the records by Dark Friends. We get an overhead shot, and we see that it's a circular hall with a symbol laid in the floor. And Rand somehow remembers this place, but he can't hold on to any of his memories firmly. He just knows he fought someone there, and then realizes he fought the Dark One, but he looked like a man, the man that Rand saw in his dream earlier. He remembers he fought the Dark One on the symbol that is in the floor in the center of this room. He reaches down to touch the symbol and suddenly finds himself in a cute, warm-looking room in the Two Rivers. Outside, Egwene is playing with an adorable baby named Joya, their daughter, and she asks if he's done his chores, basically, and then passes him his daughter as Rand looks lovingly into the baby's face. Back in the Eye, Moraine tries to wake the real Rand, because that's obviously like a vision or a dream. The real Rand is passed out. The Dark One appears to Moraine, and she channels, with her weaves turning into daggers to stab him, but he stops them easily, and then he makes the tiniest gestures with his hands, and his weaves fly into place with like a level of strength and speed and precision that we just haven't seen from a channeler thus far. Whatever he does causes Moraine some agony, and then he twitches his fingers again, and something happens within her that, like, it looks like it hurts. And he comments with, like, a mix of glee and derision that it must feel so awful to be able to sense the one power right at your fingertips, but not be able to touch it. And we see Moraine's fingers twitching as it seems like she's trying to reach the one power. Meanwhile, at the Gap, Agomar leads his soldiers into the fortress where they engage with, an army of Trollocs. In Fal Dara, we see foreigners leaving, including Min, and we see the women of Fal Dara preparing to protect the city. Amalisa then asks for any woman who can channel to come because she needs them to help protect the city. Uno and other soldiers go into the throne room and begin, breaking into the floor beneath the throne for something. The Trollocs begin their attack at the fortress at the Gap, and then we see Amalisa standing with two women on the city side of the fortress when Egwene and Nynaeve come to join them. Perrin and Loyal sit inside the fortress trying to figure out what to do to help, and Loyal, as always, just comes in with the wisdom. He says, if you want to know how to help, but you don't know how, just ask. And this is a really good life lesson, just in general, just ask. Rand is still having his vision, but he's doubting it. Egwene says that they've lived here in the Two Rivers since they returned from the Eye, but he's confused because didn't she want to be an Aes Sedai? And she says no, she's right where she wants to be. She wants this life. And he asks her some questions to try and confirm if she is really, really Egwene, and she passes his test, so kissy times. But then time stops, and the Dark One appears in this fantasy. The Dark One tells Rand that he can make this real. As the dragon, he has the power to make this real. He can remake the world in his image, and the Dark One can show him how. In the real world, in the Eye, the Dark One casually muses, wondering if Rand will choose the light or the dark, and then Moraine pulls out a big-ass knife and holds it to Rand's neck, saying that she came prepared, They both know that the Dark One cannot escape without Rand's help, and if he doesn't choose the light, she's got this big-ass knife. Perrin and Loyal help Uno and the others do whatever they're doing in the throne room, and at the Gap, the Trollocs are going full-on World War Z, climbing each other up the wall. One of them throws a spear through Agomar, pinning him to the wall, but we don't actually see him die, and I've watched a lot of TV, so I am not counting him out yet. In Rand's vision, the Dark One tells Rand that everything he wants can be gone in an instant, and he does another quick gesture with his hand, and we see at this time that there's something wrapped around his fingers, a gold thingy. Again, he gestures with his hands, and a wound appears on Egwene's neck, and Rand begs for Egwene's life, and then the wound disappears. And Rand asks the Dark One how to make this real. Back in Fal Dara, someone knocks on a door and then says a secret code word, the right code word, and gets let in. And it turns out that the person was Hadden Fain, and he's got two Fades at his side, and those two Fades decapitate the guards who let them in. In the throne room, they finally have finished their digging, and they reveal a box containing something that Uno says is called the Horn of Valier, a horn meant for the last battle, to call the Pattern's greatest heroes to fight at their side. And Perrin's like, all right, blow the horn. But Una says no, it's meant for the dragon. The Trollocs make it through the fortress at the Gap, and Amalisa, Nynaeve, and Egwene prepare to engage with them. Nynaeve is somehow able to estimate the numbers of the Trollocs, saying that there's 10,000, maybe 20. I don't know how she's doing that, but okay. Anyway, Amalisa says that she needs them all to open themselves to her. She's going to reach out to them with the one power, and they have to let her in. They do, and we see weaves going through all of the women into Amalisa, and Nynaeve and Egwene's weaves are glowing brighter than the others. In Rand's vision, the Dark One gives Rand a channeling lesson. It's like empty your mind and focus your desires, and we see weaves begin to flow into Rand, and at first they are pure white weaves, but then we see the black foulness on the weaves begin to come in as well. In the fortress, Perrin catches a glimpse of Pat and Fain, and then we hear these screams. So, they're digging up for this box, but then they just put the box with the horn on the ground and go to see what's up. Like, seriously, they just put the box down and leave. We then get some really cool contrasting shots of weaves flowing into Rand, and then we see the weaves, not dark weaves, but weaves flowing into Nynaeve and Egwene. And we see all of them being overwhelmed by what they're experiencing. Amelisa then begins to channel her weaves into explosions on the ground that begin to, decimate the Trollocs as they race towards them. One of the women in this, circle of women who are channeling falls to the ground, her eyes having been burned from her head. So this must be what Liandrin was in danger of doing in episode 4, using too much power and burning yourself out. Rand continues to channel, but then we see that he's doing what Moraine told him to do. He's channeling into the sangreal. The Dark One sees what he's doing and says, no. Like, he can remake this world in his image, make it what he wants. But Rand says, no. What about what Egwene wants? And then we see the scene flash back and forth between this vision and then the reality at the eye. As Rand says that this Egwene who doesn't care about being a wisdom, doesn't care about being an Aes Sedai, this isn't the woman that he loves. And then he channels a burst of power at the Dark One, and I'm just going to point this out here. Watch the Dark One's face as he disintegrates. Look at his expression. I have thoughts on this that are going to come up in the spoiler video. As the Dark One disintegrates, there's a loud cracking noise heard, and we see that the symbol on the floor has cracks running through it now. Moraine asks Rand what happened, and Rand says he did it. I guess he won. Perrin is still looking through Fal Dara for Fain, but then he returns to the throne room to find soldiers, including Uno, on the ground, and they're bloody with Fade standing over them, and Fain is standing over Loyal, and he's stabbing him, and no, Pat and Fain. No, stop stabbing Loyal. No, stop it right now. He does, but turns out that stopping stabbing doesn't mean that the stab didn't happen. Loyal has been stabbed, and I don't like it. Another woman burns up on the battlefield as Amelisa continues channeling. Amelisa, Egwene, and Nynaeve all begin to show that signs of burning up, where they're, glowing from the inside. Nynaeve tells Amelisa to stop, but she keeps pulling on the power. She seems to be reveling in the sensation. There aren't even any Trollocs anymore. She's just enjoying this, I think. Nynaeve and Egwene fall to the ground, and Egwene begins convulsing. And Nynaeve crawls over to her, and I think what she's trying to do here is absorb more of the power to protect Egwene from burning up, to save her life. Nynaeve's eyes and face begin to show those signs of burn marks of burning up, and then she repeats what she said in the pilot, how being a woman is to always be alone and never alone, and then Amelisa burns up and falls to the ground, and the channeling stops, and Nynaeve collapses onto Egwene, apparently dead. Pat and Fain puts the dagger that he stabbed Loyal with into his belt. And hey, I know that dagger. That's Matt's dagger. Or, no, not really. Do not give that dagger to Matt. No, don't. But, it's that dagger. Fain then gives a monologue, and he does it really, really well. This is pure exposition, but it is super engaging. He explains that the only reason he came to the Two Rivers every year is because there are 5 Ta'veren there. And he finally explains what Ta'veren is, this word that we heard in the very first episode. Ta'veren are focal points in the pattern, and they are exceedingly rare, but to have 5 in one village, that's obviously something important. And that's the reason that they sent the Trollocs, not to kill them, but to capture the Ta'veren. He says that the pattern needs balance, which means that some of them will turn to the dark, perhaps all. And then we get a shot of Matt looking, he's not looking great. Implications abound. At the Eye, Moraine says that Rand can't go back to Fal Dara, at least not yet, and Rand has no plans to do that at all. He already felt the madness coming in, and he asks if it's true that any man who channels will eventually go mad and kill everyone that he loves, and yeah, it is. He asks her to tell everyone that he died, but she reminds him that she can't lie, but he knows that she can find another way to convey that message even through her oaths. And he doesn't tell her where he's going, and he gets out of there. In Fal Dara, Fain tells Perrin that this isn't the end, it's the beginning. Perrin picks up an axe to attack him, and Fain mocks him, saying, the tiniest push and you turn to the dark. Rand may be the dragon, but all 5 of them are important. And then he turns to leave, accompanied by 2 Fades, and he takes the box containing the Horn of Valir that was just left there with him. In the eye, Moraine sits alone, holding a piece of the symbol that has cracked off in her hand. Lan comes in, having finally found her, and asks her to please unmask the bond, let him back in, but she tells him that she can't. She can't touch the source anymore, and she bursts into tears, and it's heartbreaking. It really is. Egwene holds Nynaeve's body, and she's sobbing, and then weaves begin to flow through her into Nynaeve, and Nynaeve's wounds begin to recede, and she wakes up fully healed, so I guess she wasn't completely dead. Anyway, her and Egwene embrace. In the Blight, Rand looks out over the landscape towards a vast, barren-looking wilderness and begins to walk towards it. Moraine, having, recovered a bit of her composure, shows Lan what she's holding, saying it's something called Quendiar, something that should not be able to be broken, and the fact that it has leads her to believe that this wasn't the last battle. This was only the first. And then, what's the opposite of a cold open? I actually don't know. Tag? I don't know. But anyway, we switch to a scene of an idyllic beach, and a chyron on screen lets us know that this is the far western shore. A young girl digs in the sand, but looks up to see a fleet of ships approaching. And the people on the ships, they're in very, very unusual dress, and then some women on the ships begin to channel, causing a massive tidal wave to rush towards the shore, and that's it. That's the season finale. Anyway, what did you think of this one? Let me know in the comments below. Obviously, this one is not my favorite, but there were things I liked in it, and I am still super into the show and hyped beyond measure for next season. When is it coming? Do we have a release date? Can we start pestering them to let us know that already? Is it too soon? Anyway, if you like my content and want to support me, please consider checking out my Patreon, which will be linked in the description below. My patrons, you're all amazing people, and you all mean so much to me. Thank you so, so much. And with that, I will end this here. So please like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!